morning. Good morning. Welcome to our Sunday school class for January 15th, halfway through the month. I knows it. So welcome, welcome. We are going through the age of the patriarchs in the book of Genesis, and time frame of Genesis 29, if you'd like to find your way there. We are in the 1700s BC, about 1708 BC, Middle Bronze Age is what's happening here. Last week, one of the places we visited for things that were happening in the same time frame was this place called Mount Tai, right here, or Taishan. Pretty impressive place here. China. Yep. This is, yeah. So while things were happening with Isaac and Jacob and Esau, things are happening here on Taishan Mountain. The first earthquake that's ever been recorded, not the first that happened, first we have recorded, apart from the time of the flood, was here in this time frame in the 1700s BC, maybe about 1731 or so. Talked about that a little last week. But what I wanted to show us, thank you very much.
Did you see that pop up on the screen?
Yes, I did, and I clicked it.
Oh, audio or something?
Yeah. That does that sometimes. There's actually something here I want to pull up. The reason I had this open here.
These things look great.
Yeah. Hey, man, Tim and I were just talking about that on the drive to pick up Rachel. Yes, nice seeing the green. Yeah, we're looking at a lot of dirt in this class, aren't we, with Egypt and the Middle East?
Then you see all the green next to the rivers, right?
Yeah, like the Nile.
The Nile. You see all the green next to that.
So here's this little spot here. I wanted to do a little show and tell before we get to our regular scheduled program. 18 bends. Remember those stairs?
Yeah.
Going up about Taishan?
Yeah, no.
What area is that in?
China.
China. I was gonna say the stairway, that reminds me of China.
Yeah. How many days do you have? Here's our little merchant.
Oh, my goodness.
I don't know if those are little locks for your bags. There's got a locker thing back there, or just little trinkets or whatever. Or I survived right. Yeah.
I hope he doesn't have to walk those stairs every day. Then he goes up.
He takes the elevator. Here's a proud conqueror. Yes. So, little sign here tells us this thing, this 18 bends, 18 twisting, goes 800 meters, which is half a mile. So it's half a mile of steps. Yeah, more than 1,600 stone steps.
That's bad.
And by the time you're done, you've gone straight up a quarter mile from bottom to top. Yeah.
When we went to the Sequoias and saw the Sherman tree, it was easy going down. But then when we had to come back up to where we parked, that was terrible. And oh my goodness.
Now remember, we're talking about, this is the time frame of Jacob, and when he's on the run from his family, his brothers wanting to kill him, and he has that vision in Bethel of the Jacob's ladder. And so this stairway here is described, the winding mountain pass looks like a scaling ladder to heaven in the distance. I thought that was kind of a nice little add-on there. Around the time of Jacob here.
Is that a park? Is it a national park?
Yeah, I don't know if it's well, everything's nationalized in China right now, but yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Geez.
Camping out.
Is that plug on for
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Maybe that's why
Things are running on battery, but yeah, that's
Maybe that's
probably part of it. Yeah, just popped out of here. Yeah.
You know, these kind of like going up and down.
Yeah.
I went in kayaking,
It's this one.
starting out, it's better to go upstream.
Really?
And then down, coming home back downstream.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially, having to tow somebody.
Yeah.
Ah, there's that. So yeah. So that's our little detour to the 1600 steps of the, okay, yeah, so there we go. Of the 18 bends of Mount Tyre, Mount Taishan.
But that's up in the mountains.
That's up in the
So you
mountains.
either have to drive up there or someone says, climb more stairs. Yeah, 'cause
Or
that's,
take the Skyway.
no.
They didn't have Uber back then.
Yeah. never mind.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Or it is.
So looking at the age of our patriarchs here. China, over in the capital of Anyang, is being ruled by Emperor Fa of the Xia dynasty, their very first dynasty. Egypt is being led now by Pharaoh Senuseret II of the 12th dynasty. They're in their middle kingdom. So right over here, 83, Senuseret II. This guy right here. We'll talk more about that stuff a little later on. And that pectoral we talked about some more, and we'll actually touch on that a little bit later as the family line continues on down. Notice the famous scarab beetle, the Horus falcon, and all that stuff, which is a reference back to Noah, Horus the Great, all that.
What is?
The falcon.
Oh, that's reference back.
Back, yep, exactly.
What did you say about the beetle?
Little scarab beetle. The scarab beetle pushes the orb back up. Journey, they're out. Yeah, well, that's where they get it. The Journey album covers and their whole theme and all that stuff relates to the journey of the pharaohs when they die, going through the underworld back over to Bahrain, the land of two waters, where they rise again, and where some believe Noah was buried. He's not. And then they rise with the sun and come back around and do their cycle.
So it's a symbol of their belief.
They're a symbol of their religion. Yeah.
But why a beetle?
Is that why they used them in those movies?
Yeah. Yes.
You know, the
Oh,
Scorpion Kings and all that stuff. Yeah, the mummies and
They were in
the-
the mummy movies.
yeah,
Yes.
the scarab beetles. Yeah.
They're black and black and
Was
Yeah.
it beetles?
Oh yeah.
Oh, wow.
She's right.
Good.
Oh yeah.
They glaze them. They glaze them, like they put the little rocks with it. 'Cause-
Well,
Wow.
that's what we made for.
Oh,
Yeah.
that-
I was about to say other places cover them in chocolate or caramel, but yeah. Beetlejuice. So that's not nice.
That's really cool.
Okay, yeah. So that's over in Egypt. Over in Assyria, young kingdom of Assyria, not yet in its great superpowerness. In the capital of their first capital, Assur, we have looks to be a king named Arisam the First. So that's Assur by the Tigris rivers, one of the two main rivers of Mesopotamia, that and the Euphrates. There's Mosul right there. We talked about on Wednesday nights, the war in Iraq that we went back to after 9/11, right there on the ruins of Nineveh, which would be their later capital. So here's Mesopotamia, and over here is the Promised Land, and then Egypt over there. So that's where Assur is. And over here in Mesopotamia, we've got two ruling city-states that are somewhat in competition with each other. First one is Isin over here. Their king is named Lipit Ishtar. Notice the second half of his name is Ishtar, after the goddess we've been talking about Wednesday nights from the ancient Mesopotamian days. She was worshipped here. Well, that's pretty spiffy. We're having a Max Headroom moment here. Yeah, something with the,
70s.
yeah. Wow. That's funny. Well, there we go. Okay. And so, yes, he's the second half of his name is for the goddess, false goddess Ishtar, Inanna, and how we've been seeing in modern times in America, as we've taken our eyes off God, we've created a vacuum where these other ancient spirits and demons have come back in, her being one of them, with the sexuality revolution and all of that stuff that's going on. So he's named for her. And the other one, a little further south, is in Larsa. Their king is named Zaba, over in this area. Just a couple ruin mounds are all that we have to show for those two cities today. So that's the lay of the land and the powers that be at this time of Genesis 29. Isaac, right now, Papa Isaac is over here in Beersheba. Over here in this area here, Isaac in 1708 BC is 143 years old. His twin boys, Esau and Jacob, are 83 years old right now. And so Jacob has moved on. He went up to Bethel, where he had the vision and the Jacob's ladder, and now he's over here in Haran. And by the way, question of elevation came up last week. Bethel, down over here, came up the other week, is at 2,800 feet elevation. Jerusalem itself is just a little lower, 2,556 foot elevation. They both can get snow. So all of this brings us to where we left off in Genesis 29 with Jacob's love for a girl named Rachel. Can anyone relate? So we've got in Genesis 29, verse 21, something happens. So Jacob agreed to work for 7 years for Rachel's dad so that he would let him marry her. And those 7 years came up, brings us to this year, 1708. So they're all excited for the wedding. And here's what happens. We left off here, Genesis 29, verse 21. Then Jacob said to Laban, his uncle, father of Rachel, he says, "Give me my wife, for my time is completed, that I may go into her." Laban gathered all the men of the place, made a feast. And in the evening, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to him, and Jacob went into her. Laban also gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. So it came about in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served with you? Why then have you deceived me?" But Laban said, "It is not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also, for the service of which you shall serve with me for another 7 years." Jacob did so and completed her week, and he gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. Laban also gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her maid. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban for another 7 years. Now the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Okay, well, this is about to be a mess. So Jacob goes with the intention of having one wife and maybe some kids with his one wife. He ends up, when all said and done, with 4 wives and 13 kids. So this becomes an adventure. And the question for us to always ask ourselves is, okay, where is God in the picture of all of this? So Jacob's over here up in the north in Haran. Number 20, that up there. So Laban was not upfront with Jacob, obviously. He didn't say, "Hey, before we make this deal, just so you know, we prefer to marry off the older one before the younger one. So you're going to have to marry Leah first." Didn't tell Jacob that. The deal was for Rachel. Then he snuck Leah in Rachel's place. And Jacob got up in the morning to see he'd married Leah instead of Rachel. Now that itself is a mess on several levels. But think about this. Imagine you're Leah. That's tough. You're not the one wanted. You're the older one. Your younger sister is the one wanted. And your dad says, "Let's sneak you in." Now, if you are a woman with half a woman's intuition that I know most women have a wonderful sense of, you know this isn't going to go well, be well received. So not only were you not the one that was wanted to begin with, but now you're being forced upon someone who didn't initially want you. I would not want to be Leah in that situation. That's not fair to her. That's not cool. And so Jacob, in response to this, says, "What's the deal?" Laban says, "Oh yeah, by the way." And Jacob, you could say to his credit, depending on how you want to look at it, he doesn't say, "That's it, I'm out of here. Forget you all." He says, okay, I've worked 7 years. I've got Leah now. I will spend my week with Leah, and then I'll marry Rachel, and then work 7 years for Rachel's hand. So Jacob had 2 weddings within the span of 1 week. Yeah. Yeah, so how do you think the sisters are going to get along in this situation, sharing this guy? I understand. I hear that from the ladies' studies that you have once a month, as you were going through the ladies of the Bible and their relationships with some of these men of the Bible. Apparently, a lot of the questions was, what was the man thinking? Yeah, not always of God, and not always with the godly honor and respect and dignity and treatment of each other. So that's an issue, and creates its problems, as you can imagine. By the way, the name Leah means cow, and the name Rachel means sheep.
Oh, my goodness.
By the way, yes.
So the dad's to blame.
Yeah.
The dad's to blame. Oh,
Yeah.
my goodness.
Right? Now, keep in mind, so a lot of these cultures worship cows. Yeah, Egypt is one of them. Hathor was a cow god. Yeah. These people would later worship golden calf and all that stuff. And so cows become idols. So yeah. So there are some issues here. There are some issues here. So we get to the adventures of the children coming along. What happens with these kiddos? And by the way, spoiler alert, this is where we get the 12 tribes of Israel.
From these 2 wives?
These 4.
Oh, these 4 wives.
Because it's about to get interesting.
Okay.
So in 1707 BC, we have the birth of Reuben to Jacob, who's 84 years old, and Leah, Genesis 29:32. Remember in verse 31, the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So even when people mistreat you or neglect you or disregard you, God always sees you. And maybe doesn't move or act how we would like right away instantly, but nothing gets past the Lord. Something that Pastor Carnes, I remember him saying once upon a time that really stuck with me. And so the Lord saw this, and at this moment in time, he chose to honor Leah, who was being neglected and disregarded by everyone else. So he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Leah conceived and bore a son and named him Reuben. For she said, because the Lord has seen my affliction, surely now my husband will love me. Reuben means seen or looked upon. Yeah.
Just in that verse, surely now my husband loves him.
Yeah.
What? That doesn't say a lot for I understand that women were treated the way they were.
Mm-hmm.
And where their emotions and whatever they didn't see it coming. Like,
Yeah.
He will love me, but do you love him? You were pretty.
Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times in these ancient societies, thousands of years ago, thousands of miles away, and some of it still happens today, arranged marriages and things like that. In their cultures, a lot of it was you marry who you marry for whatever reasons, and you grow to love each other. Not the ideal that comes from God. And our conviction and belief, God is the matchmaker. And so, but I'm really glad you hit on that statement. Now my husband will love me. I read that and I hear that and I think, what a horrible place for a woman to be, to have to feel like she has to say that. Your husband should love you anyway, if you never have a kid with him. And for you to feel like, okay, I've got a child now, so he's going to love me now. Women, know your worth. Know your worth as daughters of the king. Jesus said, don't cast your pearls before swine. Don't throw your value before someone who's going to trample it. You have a dignity and an honor that is to be treasured. And if someone doesn't, don't waste your time. It's distraction.
Just, you talk about our ladies' Bible studies. And yeah, when we were going through a lot of these stories, we had some interesting discussions, about the role that women played, in these Bible stories, right? Because so many times the focus is on, the man or the spiritual, point here, and it was really a blessing to me, to be able to talk to the ladies about this and kind of dig into these a little bit more, because when you read them now with like you said, was thousands of years ago. This was a different cultures and a whole different, it's very offensive. It's very offensive. And I know when we did Abraham and Sarah, when we were like, but it is heartbreaking. But then I think about what Christ did when Christ came, and how, with his perfect example of his interaction, how he interacted with women, he just wiped all that and elevated that to just perfection, right?
Amen.
Because so much of this too were arranged marriages and marriages of convenience and for property and for all these different reasons. It's like when we think about like the medieval days with the kings and queens, marrying their kids, right? Intermarrying their kids so they can grow their kingdom and stuff, and that's not quite like this, but that's why women came with dowries, right? Oh, here's a good wife, and her family's rich, so she's got 12 cows and 6 chickens and all, all these things that we just think are just horrendous. But one of the ladies I knew at the book club, she was from an arranged marriage. She just passed away, Suzanne, 79 years old. She was Indian. And her husband, I'll just tell this little story real quick.
No worries, you're good.
Her husband, he had gone and had served in the military. And when he came back, his father came to him and said, "Are you ready to settle down and get married now?" And he says, "Well, and he says, "Well, I have a girl. I have a girl that, I want you to meet." So they met, and they had like one date. And he asked her, he said, "Well, we're talking and getting along okay. Would you like to get married?" And she said, and they were married like 2 weeks later. So, so there was a little bit more choice, obviously. This is, like I say, she was, so there are arranged marriages, that still happen today. And obviously they went on and they had 2 beautiful sons, and I'm sorry, Sue was she was such a sweet lady. Such a sweet lady. And so, it does happen, but obviously she had a little bit more say in it, today. So we think about it being a long time ago, but no, there are still instances, and we know in other cultures it still goes on, hopefully with a little bit more, involvement of the female. But it was really good, studying this and researching this and seeing the different culture. And then, like say, and then when you think about how Jesus went to the woman at the well, the woman with the issue of the blood, and all these things that Jesus was just he just went right there. He was right there, showed up for us.
And Jesus said this dignity that I'm talking about women being treated with, this is how it was supposed to be from the beginning.
Right, yes, it was.
This is how God had it to be all along. God doesn't change, and the standard of life doesn't change. When we talk about marriages for political alliance and governments and nations and kingdoms and things like that, we'll see that with Solomon and how that became, he marrying Pharaoh's daughter and others, and how that became a trip up from the stumbling block for him a bit there. You brought up Abraham and Sarah. So we saw how things went when people took things into their own hands, and Sarah said, "Well, I'm not having a kid yet, so I'll give you my maid Hagar." And he said, "Okay." And it came from her.
Yeah.
And then how Hagar, when she became pregnant with Ishmael, felt a little higher and mighty, because now I have a child and Sarah doesn't. Maybe Abraham will love me, just as Leah is saying here.
See, that's just it, because the human nature comes in there, right? And so now you've got, and when you have the issue of children, it totally flips, people's countenance, right? Where you might have been one way before, once you have a child with someone, now you're, the stakes are up, and it just, that's why it's not a good thing when you step out of God's will,
And one of the things I'll say, just in my time, I was baptized in 1999, along with Sister Ashley at the San Fernando Church. So in this time of service here, of spending time amongst the Lord's people in these different churches, one of the things that's convicted me that I'll say a good thing. A woman who is a godly wife, that is powerful, that is incredible, that is beautiful, that is not common enough. That is something huge. A woman who is a godly mother, that is something powerful, that is something incredible, that is something huge that this world needs a lot more of. But now, let me set those two things aside. A woman is not defined by being someone else's husband or someone else's mother.
Wife.
Oh, yeah, wife, yeah. It's 2023, so you know. But yes, a woman is not defined by being someone else's wife or by being someone else's mom. Every woman created by God has their own identity under God. And I have seen too many women in church struggle with this, feeling like their focus was so much on the good things of being a godly wife, of being a godly mom, which are good things, but you are more than your role. Yeah. Who you are is what overflows into your roles.
Amen.
And so I remember when I pastored at Arlington, when it came time to baptize Gina Rival, who worked for me and got saved out of Bible study I was doing at work. Her husband mentioned he was a little concerned about her starting to get all religious and stuff. And he said, I didn't marry a nun. And so what I shared was, you're not losing her to God. Right. In fact, count your blessings because you're gaining something here. As great a mom and a wife as she already is, Amen. She's going to be even more so now because of the love of God that she is in that relationship with, in that kingdom relationship with now in the church. She's going to be even better wife and better mom than she was before because she's going to be a happier and better Gina than she was before. Amen. Because that's the work of God in her. She comes first, the roles come after.
And God blessed her.
And God blessed her tremendously.
He blessed her. And didn't she go on to run the company just about by the time you had left?
No, that's
well, was that Pam?
No.
Well, I know one of them was able to move up.
Yeah. Very
quickly in the company.
Yeah. So God blesses the individual, and everything else overflows from that. You are not identified by other people. Your identity is not limited to that. So there's more to what happens here with Leah, as we'll see. Very interesting how things all turn out. So we got the firstborn, Reuben. Next, we have the birth of Simeon to Jacob and Leah. Jacob's now 85 years old, 1706 BC, Genesis 29:33. Then she conceived again and bore a son and said, because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also. So she named him Simeon, which relates to hearing. Simeon is similar to the Hebrew word Shema, which is a very famous passage in Deuteronomy. Hear, O Israel, the Lord God is one. The greatest commandment, you shall love the Lord God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, etc. That passage is referred to as the Shema. Hear, O Israel. The name Simeon is related to that Shema, to hear. So Simeon, the second born, is named for Leah, recognizing God has heard me and heard that I'm still in this unloved condition. So we've got two kids now, Reuben and Simeon.
And these were his firstborn. And
yep.
He's
first and second.
And he's at an advanced age.
Yeah. He's in his mid 80s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Jacob's one of the ones where his age isn't given in the Bible at every step in the way, but his age is given later at different things. So if you do the math backwards, you kind of see, because it kind of helps make things stand out a bit more, to your point. We don't think of that.
He's having children now.
Yeah.
Later.
Exactly. And so this brings us to, while this is going on, little side note, in the city-state of Larsa, that was further over to the right in the south, we've got a new king there in 1705 BC. His name is Gungunum. He's son of an earlier king, Samium. He's a brother of the last king, Zaba. His name is Amorite, those people from the north, and comes from the word gun, meaning protection, defense, or shelter, which I'm thinking that's what it means for us too. So I thought that was cool. While he was on the throne, Larsa rose in its power and challenged the other city of Isin to be more dominant after had fallen. He conquered the city of actually, the old capital, and took over that. and was putting up statues in the temple to their god Nana, who's the moon god Sin. He's the father of Inanna, Ishtar, the goddess that we talk about on Wednesday nights. He constructed a temple for her in Larsa. And then over in the city of Nippur, in this area, so they're out of these cities, but they're expanding their territory is what's happening here and their dominance. So we'll see some of the culture over here. Now that we've seen some pretty stuff in China, we're going to go look at some dirt in the Middle East. So here's Nippur, there's Ison and Larsa's down here. So here in Nippur, this was the holiest place in Mesopotamia with all their false gods. Their main god, Enlil, ruler of all the other gods in the Sumerian world, the Akkadian world. This is where his temple was. In fact, that's it right there. Lots of evidence shows that this king Gungunum was able to get control of this city from the other city, Ison, and add it to his kingdom. He built a new city gate in continued all these statues and stuff. Silver statue for Nana's temple in So yeah, this is, we got some excavations there. I love old pictures. So there's some of the artwork from this culture here. Ta-da! In Nippur, which in the false religion of ancient Mesopotamia, this was the Mount Olympus for their gods.
That place there.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And so notice all this broken pottery. Pottery is pretty fragile. So, but by styles of pottery, that is the number one way people can tell the date of things. What's the most, because what is the most recent type of pottery that we find here? And we know it's that's the latest age range for this area. So again, not much left there today in these ruins of Nippur. Again, different style of artwork and depictions of life. Again, I love the old pictures. So there's that, and there's one more shot I want to show you that's over on this one right here. Just again, an older picture, you get the size of the people, so you get a little more of the scope of the place with that. Yeah. So while the new king of Larsa, Gungunum, is spreading out and conquering and doing his thing, Jacob is having more kids. So now in this year, 1705 BC, we have the birth of Levi to Jacob. Jacob is now 86 years old. So he and Leah become parents again, Genesis 29:34. She conceived again and bore a son and said, "Now this time my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name was Levi," which relates to being attached. We have another son now, but this is an interesting circumstance. 1704 BC, Jacob is 87 years old. Let's go to Genesis 30. Now, when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she became jealous of her sister. And she said to Jacob, "Give me children or else I die." Yeah. Then Jacob's anger burned against Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" Don't know if that was the best answer, even if it might be technically correct. Yeah. So she said, "Here is my maid, Bilhah." Let me know if this story sounds familiar. "Go into her, that she may bear on my knees, that through her I too may have children." Jacob said, "Okay." So she gave him her maid Bilhah as a wife number 3. And Jacob went into her. Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, "God has vindicated me, and indeed heard my voice, has given me a son." Therefore she named him Dan, which relates to judgment and verdict and things like that. So, yeah. Go ahead.
Verse 1 is bizarre.
"Give me children or else I die."
You know, all of a sudden, you got 4 kids.
Yeah.
Nobody lived together.
Yeah, this is kind of a mess here. So she's getting jealous because she was the one who was loved, but now Leah's having the kids. And so she's feeling threatened and insecure. When we do things God's way, the way he intended, these issues never arise. We always treat each other with dignity and respect and honor and do right by each other and by God. We don't have to worry about those things. So yeah. So then that same year, we have the birth of Judah to Jacob. He's 87 years old, and this is Jacob and Leah. Judah is the 41st generation from Christ, counting down to Christ, 41 generations to go until Jesus from Judah. He is the 23rd generation of Adam coming down. So Genesis 29:35, she conceived again, bore a son, said, "This time I'll praise the Lord." Therefore she named him Judah, and she stopped bearing. Judah relates to the word praise. And so Jesus would come from the tribe of Judah. And that is a good place for us to end on this next note. It's the next year, 1703 BC. Over in Egypt, something interesting. This. The most famous of rock-cut mausolea. This is, morning, Brother John. This is the very last one built this time. This is the tomb of Khnumhotep III, a guy, not a pharaoh, but this guy lived during the reign of the pharaoh right now, Senuseret II. On the northern interior wall of this guy's tomb, his grand chapel, this scene is painted. These are people from the promised land of Canaan called Asiatics, or in Sister Minnie. These people are coming into Egypt. They're carrying packs of ipate, which is coal, K-O-H-L, to sell to the Egyptians. The short text that describes this, accompanying the scene, tells us there are 37 persons in all, men, women, and children. The leader of the group, the chief of the hill country, Hekakaset, where we get the word Hyksos, his name is Abishai. Well, that's a pretty big biblical name. Some high priests are named that. And David Roll makes the point. The thing about these people, they wear colorful striped garments, which numerous commentators have likened to Joseph's coat of many colors. It's as if we know the story of Joseph. He gets sold by his brothers to Midianite traders who take him to Egypt. Here we have traders going to Egypt on this rock painting from 1703 BC. It's as if those Midianite traders from Genesis 37 decided to have their picture taken to commemorate their journey to Egypt. These are Asiatic, they're Habiru or Hebrews themselves. They wore the same type of garments as Jacob's Hebrew sons would wear. And so that's how they're pictured here on this guy's tomb, in their fashionable, multicolored woven coats. Now, these folks are a little too early to actually be the ones for Joseph's time. He's not born just yet. He'll be born in a couple of years. But the setting of the events of Genesis 37 with Joseph being sold by folks like these not only parallels what we see here in this picture, but when we do the fix to the timeline, this now fits in that same world, in that same time frame. So in the reign of our current pharaoh, Senuseret II, these traders from the promised land of Canaan enter Egypt, donkey caravans coming across the Sinai loaded with Canaanite goods to trade in the Nile Valley. So the scene of this guy Abishai leading his 37-strong caravan, bringing eye makeup that's shown in this tomb, reflects that contact between Canaan and Egypt. So it shows, here's evidence in history that this was a real thing and this happened. So what the Bible talks about, these traders bringing Joseph in to trade him in Egypt, yeah, it fits. No surprise. The Bible never has to change. It stands. And so that's pretty spiffy. And we will end on that note and continue picking up next week with the birth of the rest of the leaders of what will be the 12 tribes of Israel. So pausing our study there, any other observations, thoughts, or comments or questions on these things we have looked at this morning?
Yeah. They keep saying she's not loved, but she keeps having children.
She's loved of God.
Yeah.
Who matters? Whose love matters most? Never forget that. Yep. Yeah, she said, I'm unloved, and God saw she was unloved because Jacob loved Rachel, and he kind of got stuck with Leah, unintentionally, not according to his desire. And God saw that. So God loved Leah and opened her womb while Rachel at the time was barren. So Leah has now had 4 kids, and Rachel got jealous and gave her maid to Jacob to be a 3rd wife, and then had a kid named Dan. So now we've got 6 kids. We're halfway there. Well, actually, there'll be 13 counting Dinah, but we'll get there. So yeah, this continues to get a little more interesting as we go. So I appreciate the thoughts, observations, and comments. Remember, what matters most always comes back to God's value of every individual human being, man, woman, or child, as Christ lived out and demonstrated and calls us to live. Absolutely, 100%. So with that, we'll stop our share, stop recording.